Okay, welcome to our Get to Know Us, Meet Us Around the Kitchen Table. We're getting to talk about the foundations of foundational concepts, the roots of where it came from, getting to know Rowan and Sarita. I am Alicia. I am a traditional birth attendant in Texas, and I am working on a lot of the background stuff and just being their extra hands and their extra eyes. So let's get to know Rowan first, and then we'll pop over to Sarita, and then we'll get to know how they came together and what this mission looks like. Go ahead, Rowan.
Great. Hi, I'm Rowan, and I'm a traditional midwife in Western North Carolina, retired now. And um, my roots started really in running from midwifery because I really thought that traditional midwifery was dead. I thought it was long gone. It was now part of folklore. And that only nurse midwives existed because where I am from, that is the only legal pathway to midwifery. And um, I never really thought I would, it wasn't something I wanted to do or I sought out. But this young pregnant woman family moved in next door to me, and she had a toddler, and she was visibly pregnant at that point. And I started feeding her and hanging out with her and reading books with her and putting my hands, like she would be like, "Oh, the baby's moving," and all of those things like that you do. I was fascinated with her journey, and what we both realize now in hindsight is probably we were just gonna plan on staying at my house and having this baby. But when her water's released, there was green mech, so we went in, and from her birth bed, she looked up at me and said, "I'm not having any more babies until you're a midwife. Now go do it." So I said, "No, thank you," and moved to California. Like that is exactly how that went. And because I thought what was in that room, we were the only midwives that existed, these nurses that, you know, that wasn't anything that drew me in. And then I moved back to Asheville and found a little ad in the newspaper that was the Matrona, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I made a phone call, and I was in Wapio's living room the next day and found out that traditional midwifery is very much still alive and well all over, really, if you look for it or it finds you. And then I was lucky enough to apprentice with the last elder midwife in our area, and I was her last apprentice. And she was just so well, she was a horse rancher. I mean, she was just really down to earth, and she was funny and amazing. And I just, with Wapio and Claudie both, like, I mean, I moved into Wapio's house when I was studying with her, and then I just would be mucking horse stalls with Claudie to get every bit of information I could from her. And I feel like they both live on each shoulder. Like I have like the little angel and devil, and there's their voices, and then there's me in between. And with that, like came, you know, the midwife I became,
Mhm.
which has pieces of them and also my own flavor of that brings really more activism to it, I think.
And how long did you serve your community?
Oh, well, I started my studies in 2002. That birth that called me in was 24 years ago. Um, but then I started actually sitting with birth as a doula in 2002 when I took that program, and then I started attending with Claudie in 2006, and I was arrested in 2013.
And was the arrest kind of the starting point of your retirement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a big 3-year pause because
Yeah.
it had me either in jail or in a on house arrest with an ankle monitor.
And how has serving your community looked since then?
Um, but now I midwife the midwives who are either under investigation or facing criminal charges themselves.
Mm, that's so
I
needed.
yeah, like, they find me, and I find them if they don't find me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Rowan.
Yeah.
Sarita, your turn.
My turn. So I came to midwifery through a couple different ways. And the first way was through my own family lineage in West Virginia. You see the map behind me, where I grew up. And I came to understand midwifery and home birth as just normal and what you did. So there was no real question. Although when it came time for me to give birth to my first child in 1978, I couldn't find anybody because by then all of the granny midwives were gone, and I couldn't find anybody to attend me. So I very naively went to a family practice doc at a small hospital and thought I could be in control of the situation because, isn't that the way it's supposed to be? And found myself tied to a delivery table against my will, and number of things that had been promised to me were not followed through. And, thankfully that didn't interrupt my bonding or my ability to very successfully nourish my baby and have that relationship. But I began to understand from that point what these kinds of very simple things that we accept as normal can do. And so I started teaching childbirth classes because I didn't want it to happen to anybody else. And the next thing I knew, somebody showed up around midnight knocking on my front door, and I had their baby on my living room floor. A half hour later, it was somebody that had been in one of my childbirth classes. And, I thought, well, maybe I should put a bag together and begin to at least have something besides clean towels, which was pretty much all we had for that birth. And a week later, Amy, like, it just happened. And like a lot of us at that time in the home birth movement, in the new cycle of home birth, I'll call it, really were reacting and learning midwifery. We didn't have mentors, we didn't have any teachers. We had to figure it out ourselves. And we were really reacting from that place of being the citizen who was demanding sovereignty for ourselves, and therefore learning and attending births in a way to honor the sovereignty of others, really above everything else. I often say we were smart enough and dumb enough not to do much, right? Which gave us the perspective of being able to learn about birth by watching it, and watching it in, you know, a relatively undisturbed environment, as much as we understood not to disturb it, right? Because we were the most likely people, we were the ones there. At that time, it was a lot of, religious Mennonites mostly and hippies that were having home births. And so you began to really understand it also as a cultural experience, regardless of what the people in that culture might look like. And you learn to be a chameleon. You learn to, meet people where they were. Um, and, like I said, we didn't have any teachers. We had a few supporters here and there. So we all just shared stories with each other. We would meet the people that were doing it like I was. We would meet regularly and sit up all night and excitedly tell birth stories, and those stories became the textbooks,
Mhm.
is how I describe it, that we carried around in our heads. We carried each other around in our pockets, so that when we were at a birth and you could remember somebody else's story and see something that was similar in what you were experiencing at the time, it gave you someone you could call, someone you could say, hey, well, what worked for you, or at the very least what didn't work for you. So that experiential way of learning traditional midwifery, is what is hard to find these
Mm.
days, and I was very blessed by doing that. I come from people who are well known for not doing anything the easy way, right? And I will tell you that's not the easy way. And you're constantly questioning what gaps you might have or what else you can do to make your skills better. And at that time, how you walk that line between what's legal and what's not legal, right? Because it was illegal, mostly what I was doing. And, practicing midwifery without a license at that time in my state was a misdemeanor, as opposed to practicing medicine without a license, which was a felony. And so you made real clear where that line was. So yeah, so I did that as a community traditionally legal midwife or gangster outlaw midwife. We called ourselves a lot of different things, um, for about 15 years, and found myself being asked questions by all the families I had served around childhood illnesses and husbands with wounds and high blood pressure and whatever. And I realized I was really doing triage, and doing a lot of home remedies because that's what I knew and learned in herbal remedies, um, and then helping people to decide when they needed to seek medical care. And they were often unhappy with those choices of medical care, that they had to seek. So I always say that, I don't know if you know the Pink Floyd song, but in a momentary lapse of reason, I decided to go to osteopathic medical school. And it's not an easy choice. And it was certainly something that my husband and my children had to be part of the teamwork for my success, right? Like I didn't do it by myself. They maybe didn't read the books with me, but I couldn't have done it without their support. And that was part of the decision making before I even started school. Right. So, and I kept doing home births, crazy as that was, even when I was in med school. When I was in residency, then I did family medicine residency with old time docs who were amazing practitioners because they had learned to practice before all the machines and the insurance companies came along. They knew how to do it with their hands and their noses, and their eyes. And that was a another experience that we all had to go through together, as they supported me to not only learn this new expansion of my knowledge, but to not lose myself in it, right? Because that's what we can do when we have this passion, when we have this calling, whether it's midwifery or osteopathy or dentistry, which I can't imagine, whatever your calling is, right? Like you can lose yourself in it. And it's really necessary. I found it necessary, and what my family did for me was to keep me real and to balance, to help me remember who I was and where I came from, and to not lose that midwifery model of care and that midwifery thinking that was my foundation. Right? And then I practiced family practice for a while and kept doing births, and had a room in the back at the clinic, and had a little trailer on my farm we called the maxi pad, where a lot of babies were born, and still did home births, and like never lost that understanding that that's where it all starts.
Mhm.
So
And
yeah.
now take us to when the two of you met. How did your paths collide? Rowan, I think you've got this one.
Yeah. Well, as I said before, one of the things that I do now is kind of help midwife the process of going through any type of persecution um, that birth workers may be experiencing. And I saw on social media that this woman, Sarita Bennett, who I'd never heard of, was being there was a petition
Mm.
even against her to remove her as president of MANA.
Mhm.
And um, some of the things that were being said, I was like, oh, well, first off, um, I should probably talk to this person. I'm gonna send her a friend request, and I feel like I, I should get on the phone with her. So a mutual friend of ours had already talked to her, or was in the process of also talking to her, and one of the things that Sarita and I have in common because of the way we have been publicly persecuted, and especially amongst other birth workers, is a deep distrust of other birth workers. So I kind of used our mutual friend as like, she kind of was like, yeah, you can talk to her. Like I've talked to her, and like she kind of vetted her for us. Um, and so we got on the phone, and um, we were on the phone for over 4 hours, I think, our first conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I don't remember the gist of all of it, because we're just really at that point, like, where do we go from here? And I remember asking her one very specific question, and that was, do you want to fight for this position, or do you want to burn it down?
Mm.
And I liked the answer.
Tell us, what was the answer?
We had matches.
I've got the matches. We write it on.
That's right.
Yeah,
So,
they burn themselves down in the long run.
yeah, they did. I mean, all you really have to do is step back, right?
Just stop helping.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So that was kind of the first layer of connection.
Mhm.
And then you just continue to stay in contact.
When I got off the phone of that phone call, I will say that because it's a difficult thing to be persecuted publicly or in any way, especially for something that you've been working really hard and doing your best and really trying to help midwifery grow. And so to have somebody call and just listen to you, to hear your side of it, to find out what kind of person you are, was a rare jewel in that very traumatic experience. So I'd like to, thank Rowan for that, and our mutual friend. There were very few people that did that. I had her on speakerphone because I do that a lot, and because that's all part of the distrust, right? You put people on speakerphone. And when I got off the phone, my husband, who we've been married nearly 49 years, over 49 years, the first thing he just looked at me and said, "That's good people." Right? I was like, "Yeah, you're right. That's good people." And so to have somebody you could say that about in the midst of not trusting anybody was a gift. Okay. And and so then our relationship began to grow. I had other things that I went through, including an administrative persecution that Rowan and our friends supported me through. And all of that, like my family through med school, helps you remember who you are and your value as a person, and that these things that are being said about you are not real, right? Like that's a not real thing. And so it keeps you grounded and keeps you here. So we have a mutual friend who was a former client of mine, now friend, who did a story on stage for the Moth Radio Hour, and she was going to be performing it in the town where I lived. So Rowan and friends all got together, rented an Airbnb, and had a weekend party together, if you want to call it that. We went to the show and, you know, ate a lot of good food. And in the midst of all that, and oh yeah, and then we had a meeting with people about storytelling so that we began, well, we can talk about this more, our own getting better at telling our stories in a way that had its impact. And somebody had asked me to somebody who I had taught for them before asked me to come to their birth center and teach a birth assistant class. And in talking to Rowan that weekend and getting to know her better, the lightning bolt came into my brain and came out my mouth and said, "Hey, why don't you teach this with me?" And she was like, "Who, me?" "Yeah, you." And, that began sort of our work together and building this thing that we didn't even know what it was.
Mm.
We didn't even know what to call it. And I just kept saying, well, this is about foundational concepts of blah, 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 blah. And, so then we got together at a friend's house. I think we were going to also travel together after that. You know, we like to do field trips and travel together. And sat around the kitchen all weekend telling each other who we are, right?
Mm.
Like we had all this work agenda planned, right, Rowan?
We did. The stack of papers were sitting there. It was amazing. I'd glance at them every so often, and she would, me and Mom would be like, "This is the work." And
I couldn't find that in your Apple Music library. You can ask me to play a radio station or ask for your music on a different app.
okay,
So,
serious.
There you go.
so the interesting thing about that is when we were sitting around the kitchen table, we were in somebody's house whose whole house is like robotic, and that kind of thing would happen. Like this voice would come on and say things to us as we would be talking
Oh.
about the greatest thing. Yeah, but
She had
yeah,
told us she had turned off all the robots.
yeah.
She had said, I turned off all the robots, so things will not just start happening, right? Because we were at her house, but she wasn't. And yeah, we'd be sitting there and we'd say a word, and a voice would come from the kitchen and just say, I think at one point it was like, today's horoscope for Virgo. What? So anyway,
So
we sat and got to know each other and built a relationship. And I remember so many times, like because we had an agenda and we weren't getting, she would be like, we're doing the work. This is the work. This is the work.
Mm.
But as I would read through, because Sarita had, printed out all of these curriculums that she had worked with before and everything, but in every sentence, every topic, it would say, really, we're going to talk about the foundational concepts of da 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 da. And I was like, Sarita, I think we're foundational concepts. I think it's there. It's right here in everything that's written. Foundational concepts.
Mm.
So, because it really is like no matter what you're doing as, in midwifery, in life, you come back to the fundamentals,
Mm.
right? And you try to keep it as simple as possible and you come back to the fundamentals. And I think that's really what foundational concepts is. It's built on whatever's true no matter what. What's true no matter what.
Right, right.
So give us your mission behind this. What's your mission? Why are you doing this? Who is this for? Why does this light a fire inside of your heart? What's your heart's?
I'll go first on this one. So for many years, I've taught people in a lot of different ways, right? Whether it was my own children through homeschool or it was medical students or, whatever it might be. And somewhere along the way, my husband reminded me that I wasn't getting any younger and that if I was gonna, yeah, he's he knows me well. That, I might want to get on with passing on what I had learned because I had learned it in such a, especially today, uniquely different way. And it was so broad, right? So that was when I started, and I've done several different curriculums and programs. That was when I started doing that, right? So my mission is to do that, to pass on what I know, and to use some of the gifts I've been given. Especially, I have a pretty good gift of being able to distill information down into the essentials, right? Like that's the foundation. If you can understand that, then you can build something out of all of these facts that you're going to learn. If you don't have the glue to put the facts together, if you don't have that foundation, then you can't build as much, right? So part of my mission is to help be that glue for people, no matter how they might, what other programs they might do, or what other types of learning they might have, even what other types of experience they might have, but to help be a glue that pulls a lot of different things together in an essential way to make your understanding of reproduction stronger, right? The two things I have to say about that then is, and I'm going to quote my husband again a little bit. Part of it's because I want all of us to know how to not screw up normal,
Mm.
because we do that unknowingly and unintentionally. But if we can understand how it works, then maybe we won't screw up normal at least as much. And then I want us to be able to know normal so well that we recognize abnormal in a timely and calm manner and know how to resolve it or, respond to it. So that's always my approach to any kind of outlines or curriculum or PowerPoints that I put together is with that aim.
I would say you're totally spot on with that there's this glue, that you do have this superpower, not even just a gift, it's a superpower
Super
of
glue.
yeah, of being able to hone in, find that just baseline, that foundation. What are we growing from? Because I've done several courses. I've read the books. I did 10 years of apprenticeship, and you always get lost. I always got lost looking at, you're holding this gigantic hard book, purple and fry, you're lost. You're looking at the forest, but it is so grounding to be able to say, sure, there's the forest, but what is it all rooted into? It's all rooted into this soil,
Right.
this highly nourished and potent soil. And that has been that was so beautiful to me about when I sat with you guys in person.
Nice. Thank you.
Okay, Rowan, give us your heart.
Love that. Yeah, I love everything Sarita just said, and she does that for me too, because I also get lost in the forest sometimes. And I think for me, my mission, I laughingly say sometimes, like, I just want to make more outlaw midwives. And and I think what that really is rooted in is I don't want us to forget. I just don't want us to forget. And I think the best way for that to not happen is for us to gather by the fire, is to come together no matter what credential is behind your name, no matter what your foundation is, your schooling is, no matter what it is, and to realize that at our core, we have one solidary mission, and that is for families to have autonomy in their birth.
Mhm.
100%. Like, that's it. And so for me, this thing that we're doing, that we're coming out and we're bringing, is a way for us to come together, be that glue, and also remember that we all have innately in us the wisdom.
Mhm.
And I don't want us to lose that. I don't want us to forget that. We've done things in captivity for so long, and I'm just ready for us to break out and be wild.
Right.
So we've talked a little bit about how this isn't for one specific person. What, in a very quick synopsis, what are you looking for from your students, whether they're online in your mentorship or they're sitting in your in-person different intensives?
What are we looking for from our students?
Who would jive the best with you guys?
Um, hmm. I would not, first I'll say what I would not limit it to. How about that? I would not limit sitting with us to any one group as far as just students or just doulas or just, just any, like no just any's, right? So I think because what I found is when you can distill this information and present it in this way, that it really can help people take a step deeper in whatever way they need to go, right? Like it's a new way to look at things. It's a new way to look at yourself. It's a new way to perhaps understand your relationship with the world, with the community, with your clients, whatever that might be. But what I am looking for is for people who are willing to be fully engaged and and curious. I'm looking for curiosity. I'm looking for awareness. I'm looking for vulnerability. I'm looking for authenticity, right? I'm looking for truth telling, even when it hurts. I'm looking for people who are willing to do the sacred work of midwifery and of attending each other. And midwifery, I'm not limiting that work to anybody with any title, right? Or even that it has to be somebody pushing a baby out.
Mhm.
I'm looking for people who are willing to understand this work is sacred, whether people are being born, living, or dying, and are willing to be human with us. We can't spoon feed you, right? Like we can't, we can offer information, but I know I'm not there, and I think I can speak for Rowan, knowing her fairly well. We're not there to do it for anybody, but we'll go along and we'll bring our gifts and we'll bring our stories and we'll help you remember yours, right? But you have to be engaged and you have to be willing to be real.
Wonderful. Anything else either of you want to add before we close out our call?
Yes. I want to know, also like why you're here.
Yeah, okay. So give you a little bit. I'm here to dig my roots into that beautiful fertilized soil of um of this remembering. I come from a line of parteras in El Salvador, and while I didn't know them in person, I know them. They're in me. They're in my blood. And I am so passionate about recalling what they had and what they knew. And yes, it skipped a generation, but it's coming back. And I want to keep it from skipping more generations. Give it to my daughter and passing it to the women that I'm serving, and then them passing it to their sisters and their daughters, and then even it being passed to their mothers, because there's not this time frame, this timeline of, oh, you're past the remembering. That's not what it is. So I'm here to continue the remembering of what did we forget? How can we keep from forgetting? And how can we continue to pass this on?
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, guys, I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.